Hello. As you can probably see, I've had a haircut, and that'll be the topic I meander on today as a bit of a break from some of the political and philosophical and economic bits. So I'm trying to think, like, what do I talk about a haircut? Like, what do I say? I'm obviously, I think, not going to critique the style or the cut in any way. I mean, if we look at how I tend to view haircuts myself, the ones I get are practical. Every 4 to 6 months, my hair grows long enough that it starts getting my eyes. It starts taking a little longer to dry. So I go to get it cut, and I just say, hey, give me short, right? Sometimes it'll be, a 3 or something all over. Sometimes they'll do a little more complicated style where it's longer on top and there's some sort of bangs going on. I don't really pay attention or care very much, because for me, the hair is more about what am I doing with it, right? Like, what is the purpose of having hair? And in one sense, it is practical. Okay, so I have this braid, this long Padawan braid here, and I got to be careful with it because there was one time I got it caught in a drill. And it's wrapped, it's caught in a drill, it's wrapped in this drill, and it's slowly going more and more into a spiral and more and more towards my face. As I'm going like this, I'm like, okay, I'm going to lose an eye. Luckily, it breaks off and so on. But ever since then, anytime I deal with hand tools or power tools, I'm like, okay, I need to remain conscious of my hair more. I've had long hair before, down to here. And you learn when your hair is that long how you have to deal with it. It takes extra time to dry, for example. Every time you lean forward, your bangs just drop in front of your face and you can't see anything. So you end up, pulling back in ponytails and so on. Quite often. It becomes unruly to deal with. If it's dirty, then that can be a big problem, big trouble. It also stands out, at least when you're a guy like I am. And it's interesting to experience, right? Interesting to think about how it conforms to your every movement. How everything you do, it becomes sort of a matter of dealing with this mass of curls attached to your head. And the way you walk, the way you look up and down. Is the day windy? Like, if you have really long hair and it's windy, then it flaps across your face and you can't see anything. You tend to, it's warmer, for example, but it can also frizz up in certain types of weather or flatten down. It's more of a living piece. Whereas if you have a short hair like this, it is very simple to maintain. It dries in maybe 10 minutes after getting out of the shower. And so for most of my life, I've had this short hair. Then I grew it long once just to see how that was different. And then I cut it short again, kept a little braid to remind myself of how long it used to be. And at least as a sort of memory or device to remind myself. I mean, it's the style is a Padawan braid. It's like, hey, I have more to learn, is the idea here. And, well, a haircut in my daily life is mostly dealing with practicalities. You have this other side as well, the let's call it the aesthetic side, right? I notice just today, as the hairstylist is cutting my hair, that she spends an inordinate amount of time on the back. and a long amount of time on around the ears. Like, she's pulling out 3 or 4 various attachments to the clippers and taking your time. It is something that makes you think when you're walking around looking at people. As someone like me who isn't really all that interested in the aesthetics of hair, who doesn't pay attention to the quality or the length or the style, who doesn't really have an aesthetic sense, it's always interesting to realize there are folk like my grandma used to go get a perm every month and go to a hairstylist every week. Like she spent so much time maintaining her hair in a certain style, and this style becomes identified with her. She thinks that this is the proper style. She thinks that it looks good on her, and so she sticks with it. I had a roommate once who he had like long braided hair, and he decided one day he's going to shave half of it off. Half his head was bald, the other half had, braids down to your shoulders and whatnot. He did various things and moved it around. And I remember thinking that was interesting. At the time, I dyed my hair white once. I wouldn't do that again because it ruined the end, and I didn't really enjoy having straw for head. And that was, for me, the first time I'd done anything aesthetic to my hair. And I thought it would stand out. I thought it would mark me as different. I thought I would be able to become more confident because I had such a wild style in my hair. And I wonder how people who have those styles, or people who say color their hair, like, why is that? Like, what is the point? Who are you communicating to? Like, because I think about this as I have, my one little braid, one little Padawan braid here, is that people sometimes comment on it. And I've also noticed that in circumstances where I might be getting a bit of a side eye, and people might be looking at me kind of weird, that something like this changes the way people react to me. Because it says something about my identity, right? It communicates a feeling. And when it comes to more extreme examples like this, one odd braid or colored hair or half your head shaved bald, then you are saying to other people that I'm different, or I'm unique, or I have a bit of a rebellious attitude. I think you're saying that I'm not dangerous. Why? Because I'm on some weird social venue here, some real weird side of the social ladder. As you follow styles which are more defined, you have a punk mohawk, for example, or you're totally bald, or you've got like a goth look and it's all black and spiky, and you got black eyeliner and stuff like that. Then other information is passed along. And one of the things I tend to wonder about is how much of that is for other people and how much of that is for yourself. Because I know people do spend a lot of time on their hair. I know that the way their hair looks and feels is very important to folk. And if I ended up losing all my hair or this got cut someday, I'd be sad, but I don't think I would be as upset as certain people I've met would be, because of how they identify with their hair as a part of them. As well, I know that there are folk who spend a lot of time on their hair, right? I was, at the barber shop today. It's one newly opened and whatnot. And the hairstylist was like, "Oh, do you want me to shampoo your head? Do you want any product in it?" And I'm like, no, no, I don't really. I'll shampoo my head at home. I don't want any product in it. If you like, do you want to see the back? I'm like, I don't. I'm sure you did a wonderful time with the back, right? I don't really. I can't see it myself, and I get a haircut every 4, 5, 6 months, so it'll grow out. Whatever issues were there from the cut you did will be gone in a few weeks. Why would I care exactly? And it's very obvious that some people do. The aesthetics of look are incredibly important to folk, and I think that for hairstyles which are more, let's say, extreme, I'm beginning to partially understand some of the reasons for that, because it stands out. It's a way to tell the world that you are different in some way, but it is also a way to identify yourself as different, right? You go into a job interview with half your head braids down to your shoulder, the other half completely bald. You go into a meeting with a lawyer or something, or you are standing in a service position, right, at a grocery store, checking checking security issues, for example, or bagging items, or even stocking shelves. Then an extreme haircut is something where you can identify yourself as an individual, and you can remind yourself that you are an individual, even though you have to wear a suit and tie, or even though you need to wear a uniform. It is something, a haircut that is something that cannot be easily taken away, isn't easily changed. So it's more permanent. And yeah, there are issues you can have with temporary hair colors. And when your hair is long, you can play with it, and you can have braids or ponytails or differing styles. Tie it here, tie it there, whatnot. Have it up, have it down. You can decide on different trims to make it fall in different ways, and so on. So there are more options with long hair than short hair. But a haircut is a change which is not amenable to. Sorry, a haircut is a state which is not amenable to easy, quick change. Even if it's long, you can tie it up in different ways for different aesthetics. Here's a bun, here's a braid. Is it falling straight? These take time to do. And the fact of what your hair is like isn't easily shifted. It's still going to be long or short. There's only so much you can hide. And with extreme styles, you are not hiding at all. You're trying to hold on to your identity by marking it to the world, but also it acts as a sort of shortcut, right? If I feel that I'm a rebel, or I'm a goth, or I feel that I don't feel that I am not comfortable just being seen as a worker at the store, or I am not comfortable being seen as, oh, this is just another guy, with really short hair, right? Then I may gravitate towards a more extreme hairstyle, or not necessarily extreme, but one with more pointed features, perhaps. Right, and Yeah, you also have to ask yourself, right? Like, how important is my outer look to who I am as an individual? If I appear to be the office worker, in Japan who looks totally normal, and then I go out on weekends and I dress up as a punk or something, or I go on and to anime conventions and dress as characters, then hair and the way you dress becomes a way of doing something which demonstrates your individuality without having to modify yourself to such an extreme extent that you can't take back what you did, right? Like a haircut is less permanent than a tattoo, let's say. Even though a tattoo might be undertaken for many of the same reasons, as a memorial, as a means of distinguishing yourself, as a reminder to you about an event that happened, and so on. Tattoos are more likely, I would say, to be a picture or a message, a words or a symbol. Whereas hair is more abstract, right? Like you can draw a tattoo of a heart. You can have the name of someone tattooed on you. You can have the Fibonacci sequence, tattooed on you, and you know what that means, why it's there. But as you're walking around and your hair is in a certain way, this is a Padawan braid from Star Wars is the idea here, is the style, quote unquote. And some people recognize it, some people don't. But to most folk, I have one weird braid, and yet to me it means more because I know the story behind it. So perhaps the names of certain styles may impact what's going on here, right? Like if you're dressed in if you have a mohawk, for example, or you have the two mohawk bits, or your hair is all white, or your hair is like has purple tips or whatnot, then depending on the situation you find yourself in, that may indicate to others that I am part of a certain group. That may indicate to others, it is a way of saying in shorthand, without having to explain yourself time and time again, oh, this person gets me, right? It is a quick means of it is a quick means of visual communication. Where, the more extreme, the stronger and clearer the communication. But it is also possible to have like a reverse mohawk, and you're like, what does that mean about a person? It's not entirely clear who they are just from a haircut. And then what if we think of haircuts for purely aesthetic reasons, right? If you go and get a haircut and say, well, I think this haircut looks good on me. I think this style looks good on me. It makes my hair taller, which hides my cheeks or something. I don't like my giant forehead, so I have long bangs. I think that this sort of cut with my long hair frames my face better. Or I tend to like curls, so I'll spend hours with my hair in a curler because I like how it looks and so on. And there's a difference, I think, between I like how it looks versus how I like how it looks on me. We can certainly have a hairstyle which doesn't suit us. And occasionally I see people who you look at them and you're going, oh, wow, they have great hair. Right? Like even I notice someone has great hair. And when that happens, I'm thinking, okay, like how what does that mean to me? What does that communicate? When I just had short hair, it didn't really mean that much to me. And then as I grew my hair out longer and longer and longer, I would see people around with long hair, and I'd go, oh, they work on this, right? Like they pay attention to their hair. They put in products, or they have highlights added. And I'm like, oh, okay, I understand that this is a commitment that requires effort. This is an aesthetic choice which actually impacts, to an extent, the way you live your life. And I do wonder why people choose that sometimes. Because whereas for me, something like this, braid, is a story behind it, has a message to me, myself. What about when someone just has, good hair? Someone adds highlights, and someone spends hours in this and tries to look nice as part of their aesthetic. Wears makeup or works out, and that hair is just one aspect of how they present themselves. So when we think about, for example, what makes someone attractive, there's two options to look at. There's two sides of the equation as regards haircut and hairstyles. One is just the pure aesthetic. Does it look good? Do they take care of their hair? Have they spent time on it? Is it full of tangles? Do they get it trimmed? That it's just, is that nice looking hair? Do I see it and I'm immediately think, oh, that's pretty. The other aspect to it is less of a prettiness and more of acknowledging the quality of work involved in it. Right? It's stopping by and saying, oh my gosh, how did you do that to your hair? Or what sort of gel do you put in it? It's seeing someone with hair down to their lower back and going, oh, you must have spent like 2 years growing that out. It's looking at this person with an extreme haircut and recognizing, oh, like even if the extreme haircut doesn't suit you, or I don't really like it, and I've seen some haircuts which I'm going, okay, that's not great. But one thing that an extreme haircut does is it says to me that the person who has gotten this haircut is willing to identify themselves in a certain manner. It's instead of speech or action, they've chosen something where they have a visual state that they had to choose particularly to keep. Right? You don't end up with like long braids and one happened totally bald. You don't end up with one braid like this. You don't end up with a mohawk by accident. This is, you saw it and you thought it was cool. You saw it and you wanted to fit in. You saw it and you wanted to stand out. So you chose that. When we go into a barbershop or a beauty parlor, a lot of times they'll have pictures of people on the wall, celebrities or models. And sometimes people will choose a hairstyle based on that. And they say, oh, I want this hairstyle. I want this hairstyle. I want one that looks like this, or I want this done to me, and so on. And these I tend to find a little more confusing, because an extreme hairstyle obviously stands out, but the difference between a pixie cut or a bob cut, or was it, when I was young, was like the Jennifer Aniston was a certain cut of some, I don't know what that means really, or you can ask for a fade, or braids, curls, cornrows. You can come up with all these little bits and pieces. And I think what can happen in situations like that is sort of interesting, because you're walking along with a hairstyle inspired by a celebrity, with a hairstyle that has a recognized name to it, or with a hairstyle that, you know, has obvious effort put into it. And there will be folk who are like me, not really sure of all the differences between these hairstyles. You know, I can sort of recognize when one requires a whole lot of effort, but I'm not really clear on is that 10 minutes in the morning? Do you go every week to the barbers? Right? Like, what's going on here? I remember one time a friend of mine, he had his hair done in braids. And I was asking him about it. He's like, "Oh yeah, it took me like 2 hours for all these braids to come through, and his scalp is burning red because they're super tightened." And then I see that, I'm like, and I begin to realize, oh, okay, so when you get like braids done, this requires a lot of time, a lot of effort, and it is painful to go through. So, I mean, the question obviously is, well, why do this? Why pick a hairstyle which is expensive, takes a long time, and literally painful to you? It's aesthetics. It's messaging. It's, oh, I like my hair like this, or I wanted my hair long, but it's too frizzy or fuzzy to do it anywhere else. So if I want long hair, then I have to put it into braids. I have to control this because it's kinky and binds to itself. You know, I don't have long straight hair like you do. You know, I can't have these gentle curls. I end up with a giant afro. So we have to also recognize that, you know, the different hair types and different hair cultures, which I am to a great degree unaware of. But within those types of folk that pay more attention to their hair, that are more focused on the aesthetic outlook, it seems that they often know what's going on. There's a message being passed along by the type or style of hair you choose that I am simply, or I feel at least that I'm mostly unaware of. It's only after I have personally had conversations with people, or after I have personally had, you know, long hair or short hair, or dyed my hair or whatnot, that I begin to appreciate the differences and effort required, and some of the messages being passed along, some of the reasons folk might have their hair cut in a certain way. But when I go into the barber shop, they'll ask me questions, and I'm like, I don't know the answer to this. You know, a fade, a high top, what sort of style do you want? I'm like, I don't really care that much. You know, I have my distinguishing feature, and I work with it. When it out of my way, my ideas are more physical, and that comes along with my own philosophy, right? For a long time, I sort of, well, I still do to a great extent, struggle with the idea of dressing up, right? Of taking time to appear aesthetically pleasing in a way, right? I don't mean just like an extreme haircut, or a one braid, or dyeing your hair and giving a message, like a message. I mean more subtle changes, like having a well-trimmed beard, you know, spending time on that, like putting product in your hair to make it stand up, like, you know, doing the brushing your hair 100 times a night, you know, like buying certain types of shampoos or lotions to make sure it turns out right, or has a shine or a sheen to it. This also happens with dressing up. Like, well, if someone is dressing up and they look like nice or pretty or handsome or something, and I'm going, well, why is that, right? And for me, an extreme haircut can also be a message to myself, because that's what I've done. It's super long hair, or I had hair which is dyed white, or I've had hair with one braid, and I might choose those hairstyles because of the message I'm telling myself, just as much as the message I'm telling someone else. If I've dyed all my hair white, then I know that as I go into a social situation, that I stand out more. I may fail in being, socially active to the level that matches the vision, but at least I can see myself in the mirror as I walk down the hallway and go, okay, remember me, I stand out already, so don't be embarrassed just because, 3 people are talking to you. Don't freak out. Don't. And as a way to try to overcome social anxiety, you put yourself in situations where because of the way you dress or act, you literally cannot escape the situation of standing out. You dive into the anxiety as far as you can in order to build up a resistance, make yourself more capable. But for me, more subtle changes still evade. I might understand why someone dresses totally goth and, black lipstick or something. I might understand why a person walks around with a t-shirt that has the name of a band on it, or has a Pokemon on it or something. I can understand why people get a tattoo which has a picture of a saint, or that is a full sleeve of like a dragon or something, right? These are, I understand. When it's more subtle, and when it is extremely small things, like, I don't know, like you tattoo your dog's name on your hand or something, then that's understandable. It's personal. It's the in-between area that I tend to find a little more difficult to comprehend. Right? Like why would you want a haircut which is looks nice but isn't extreme, doesn't really stand out, which just compliments you? Why would you dress in a certain way, caring for the styles, but having a style that is more subtle or gentle, as opposed to extreme? There's a difference between, do you wear a checkered jacket versus are you wearing a jacket, like a dark leather jacket with silver trim or something? Right? The stronger the message, the more clear the message is. It is the subtle messages, the subtle differences that are more problematic for someone like me. Because, I don't really pay that much attention to how I dress and so on. This comes from, a philosophy of aesthetics that says, how I look shouldn't really matter. It's more about personality. It's more about interaction. It's more about speech. And, if I have like a one braid like this, and that is a single point of communication, right? That is a hook that might draw me into a conversation and so on. But if I had this cut off and I was short, or if I had gone in and I had pulled up a picture of, I don't know, Brad Pitt or something. What is he, like 60 now? Shows my age. But if I had walked out with instructions, with a picture, wearing clothes that I had picked out for their aesthetic quality, then it's like, how should I interpret this? I'm beginning to understand it more as effort, right? It's not about do you look pretty, it's about do you put in the effort to try and look pretty or handsome. That explains to me how I should interpret someone's aesthetic appearance. Of course, my eye is still, drawn or caught for a few minutes here and there by a particular look or color or shape of face or something like this. But that doesn't mean I understand why I personally see, aesthetic levels or appreciate an aesthetic shape or form more than another one. Right? It's not clear that I have like these levels of aesthetic from 10 to 1. And very clear reason for placing people in there. No, it's a very complicated process that is ever changing and ongoing, right? You can talk to someone that it seems nice, and then they say something, you're like, okay, never mind, they're horrible. Or you can talk to someone who doesn't look very good, and they say something, you realize, oh, they have like a greatness to them, right? You can see someone in a situation, and then in another situation, you see them at work, you see them at a party, and these are totally different events where you might learn something different about them. So a haircut for practical reasons, a short, practical. If it's long though, if it's got a lot of volume and shape to it, and obviously people have spent time on it, if it's just in fades or it's in braids, then it's a little more complicated. These are done for aesthetic reasons, both personal aesthetic reasons and aesthetic reasons for communicating to others. Right? And the third idea I wanted to think about regarding haircuts is what's it called? I wrote this down. The ritualistic ideas about haircuts. The ritualistic ideas about having haircuts. There is, at least in some cultures, I can't remember exactly which ones. Like old cultures. I got that in my head somewhere. That if you are grieving, then you cut off your hair. You throw it on the burning funeral pile and whatnot. You let it escape to the wind. And if you have a lover or something, you might keep a lock of their hair with you. Or if you have a child, you might have cut off a lock of their hair and put it in a baby book. So that hair as a piece of the human body that is able to be discarded can be used for very strong ritualistic reasons, very strong emotional effects it can have. Like I once had really long hair down to like my elbows, and I went in one day, chopped it all off. I said we're going to take it down. We're going to take it from being all the way down here to like this, and keep one braid. As a memento, as a reminder that I spent like 2.5 years growing my hair out because I had the opportunity to, because I could. Because I didn't care if I looked good or not for anybody. It was more about having the experience in the event. And I know that this is something that can happen. You go through a huge change in your life and you cut your hair, or you are even just transitioning from one situation to another, from a party to work, and now you take out the temporary color, you take out some of the weird hair ties, and you pull everything down, you make it straight. You want to look more professional. If you're hiring someone for an office job, you're hiring a lawyer, who are you more likely to hire? The one who has half his head shaved bald, or the person with a serious haircut? That is, the hairstyle we use passes along messages, but it can also be used to pass along those messages to ourselves, right? It can be used to change our mindset and go, okay, this is my party look. This is my office look. And I act differently when I dress up like this versus when I dress up like that. And I know I intend to act differently, and it's because the situations are totally separate, or you might have one identity in a certain situation with a certain hairstyle, and then another identity with a different hairstyle or a different way of dressing. I know it can be relaxing to go and get a haircut. You sit there and the hands are in your head. You get a shampoo. Someone is basically right there sculpting you like you were a statue to make sure you look just great, just perfect. And sometimes the event of a haircut can be the reason for the haircut in the first place. Like I know my grandma would go to a hair place every week or 2 weeks, and she'd talk to people, right? She went to the same hairstylist for 40 years. There were people she knew who also went to that same hairstylist, and she'd talk to them over lunch, or they'd go and get their hair done, and afterwards have a bite to eat. And so it's not just a personal event between you and the hairstylist, or a personal event for yourself. Like if I look in the mirror sometimes and I might shave my beard a little bit because it doesn't grow quite evenly, and that's very annoying. There can be religious reasons for certain haircuts or certain styles. Do you have a beard? Are you supposed to cut your hair? And so on. The way you dress explains to other people who you are, but it can also be a ritual you go through every day. I take time out of my day to oil my beard, or and twirl the mustache just right, because that's part of my not only aesthetic but daily rituals. Or if I'm going out on a date, then I go and get a haircut first, so that I show the person I'm involved with that I took time to pretty myself up for them. Or if you're going to a funeral, like I have a brother who doesn't like to cut his beard at all, but he's cut his beard once in a while for funerals and whatnot, so that it looks proper, so that he matches the ritual atmosphere and theater of it. Also for a wedding once. And I think many people have had this happen to them, where a coworker or a fellow student or a friend comes in one day and they have had a haircut. Sometimes these haircuts are quite small, and like, oh, did you have a haircut? I wasn't quite sure. And sometimes you'll see people gathering around. Oh, I like how your hair is. It's so nice. Great style, great choice, and whatnot, as a topic of conversation. We've also had instances where someone comes in and you go, oh, wow, what happened to you? Like you didn't just have your hair cut. You shaved. You went bald. You didn't just have a little trim. You cut off 12 inches of hair. This is a radical change. It isn't simply I'm going to try a different style. It indicates that something is different in my life, or I intend for something to be different in my life, right? Like when I had my hair cut, about 12 inches, 12, 14 inches of it, it was in one sense just because I didn't want to deal with the long hair anymore. And I want to go back to short hair, and I didn't really want to try medium length hair and spend time getting into different styles and movements and whatnot. I just wanted it done, and I wanted to transition from an extremer haircut, this really long hair in a guy, to a different extreme haircut, which is just the one braid. Because that's what I'm comfortable with, is clear messaging. And then, so now the question becomes, for me as an individual, why did I get my hair cut? I think I got it cut for practical reasons. It was getting kind of long. It was taking a longer time to dry. It was beginning to get in my eyes. I didn't think it looked great because it was just like on this helmet. And it was at that point where if it gets dirty, then it sticks to my head. So I have to wash it every, 2, 3, 4, 5 days, or else it starts to become sticky. I'm having to deal with dandruff because it's not drying right. And I don't see the need or the effort to change its aesthetics. I don't go and I want to look like this person or that person, or I want to impress somebody with how my hair looks or how much effort I put into it. Instead I go, I'm not showing off for anybody. I'm just for myself. I want it out of my eyes. I don't want to have to go in 2 months to get my hair cut again. Because I left it in a medium length, and that difference between medium long is less than the difference between short and long. Like just get rid of the bangs, because I'll judge when I get my hair cut next pretty much by, does it fall into my eyes? I may get my hair cut before that, of course, but I won't feel the need for it. I won't feel pushed to do it. Because the braid is enough of an aesthetic message for me. And as for rituals, that becomes a little more complicated, right? I think that if you are not used to thinking of a haircut as a ritual, then getting a haircut doesn't really mean that much. But once you go through that instance where you cut off 12 or 14 inches, or you go through the instance where you dye it white, or you cut it or half of it is bald, then in your head there is this idea that perhaps you can use a haircut as a ritualistic device, as a message to yourself, not because of its practicality, not because of how it looks, but the simple fact that you got your hair cut as a period regarding a point in your life, or as a sign that you can change, because it's something small within your control. It's something that you see in the mirror. It's something that other people see as they look at you. And it involves, like I said, a cutting off, a removal of a bodily part of yourself, which doesn't harm you. It involves a messaging that says this is an opportunity, like this is a moment of opportunity. Because if we want to express ourselves or do something, a ritual or a traditional moment can be very helpful in that, right? You don't just wake up, I mean, you can, right? But generally, you don't just wake up one day and go, I'm going to change my life. You don't just wake up one day and say, I'm going to start my activities. You don't just wake up one day and go, I'm going to go adventure around the world. No, something happens to you, or you do something, right? You cut your hair, you dress up differently, you sell all your Pokemon cards to fund a trip to Japan or something like this, right? That is, by using a ritual moment as and utilizing it as a ritual effect, you can open up energies or the mental push you need to engage in a different situation. You can say, I'm different, and you have something to reinforce that statement. Or you can say that I am willing to do something different. And I have demonstrated this in the first instance by cutting my hair, by a visual shift, which is obvious. So the next step is smaller because I've already taken this little step. I don't just look the same and I'm being different. I look different and I'm being different. So, for me, haircuts tend to be more complicated than I think they are. Because I think as I'm getting a haircut, as I'm preparing for a haircut, that I'm just like, okay, the bangs are in my eyes, or it's getting too long and that's becoming a trouble again. So let me just cut it off, buzz cut it down. But as I do this and remember previous haircuts I've had, which are more extreme than perhaps my own internal culture regarding my haircuts changes and shifts a little bit. Because I don't go in every week. Like a haircut for me is a 2 or 3 times a year event. And depending on how, let's say, complicated my year has been, a great deal of time may have passed between those 4 or 6 months, as opposed to a different period, right? If I'm going to work every day, if I'm going to school every day, and it's sort of the same all the time, then I don't really notice this passage, this movement. But then I can use a haircut as a hyphen point, right? As a period point. I'm going through my pictures, and this was this time, and this was this time, this was this time. And if I choose these more extreme haircuts, these more extreme changes, then I can more easily demarcate my experiences. Whereas if I went in, every month and got my hair cut and styled in a certain way, or if I spent hours working out how I wanted to look, or putting in the right product, or researching the right product, even figuring out what product is exactly, then I think that would become a different sort of ritual. It would become a more daily activity, a way of grounding myself instead of a way of discriminating myself. So there are different ways to use your hair care or haircuts as a ritual than what I am choosing to do. And I wonder how other people might see or experience their haircuts and the reason for them. Is it, if you change your hairstyle, is that a big change or a small change? Do you pay attention to your hair or not? If so, why? Do you pay attention to other people's hair? If so, why? Like what do you see in these different styles that I don't, and I never really had the interest in trying to find out, because I wouldn't engage in that conversation. Like I have no need to worry about the aesthetics and the messages I'm trying to get across by slightly different styles or types of haircut, or if it looks bad or good. No one's telling me anything about this, and I'm not really having an opinion myself. Nor would I wish someone to judge me based purely on my hair, or my way of dressing, or the way I look. I'd rather be judged on, how I talk, how I act, how I think. But I say that, and I still have a Padawan braid like this. I still have a more extreme visual display. And perhaps I should ask myself, why do I have that? What am I trying to say? Partially, it's a message to myself, of course. I still have much to learn. I'm not a Jedi Knight by any means. I still screw up all the time. Let's make sure I remember that. It's partially a memento. I had long hair. It's partially a way of letting myself know that I stand out just a little bit as not entirely normal, I hope. Because, who wants to be entirely normal? Who wants to be entirely boring? We want to have our own identity, and sometimes it can be difficult to achieve that. So we might reach for more extreme statements. And I don't know, it goes back to perhaps what kind of life do you live? Do you live one where every day is not necessarily the same, but every day is in pursuit of the same goal, right? You have a dream or a desire or a process you engage in. I go to work in the weekdays, I relax during the weekends. I'm going to school, I'm studying, I'm working, I'm learning, I'm traveling, and my hair is a part of daily life, how I act and what I do with it. And the other way, of course, is I don't pay attention to my hair, really. It's only when it starts to bother me. It's only when I feel stressed that I have these big changes. It's only when I feel I need to mark a space, like a ritual space out and change something, that I'll go and have an extreme movement done with my hair. And then all of a sudden I notice it. And we can also be aware of changes in our hair over time. Like, not balding, but I've noticed that, like, my beard, for example, tends to grow faster on the left side than the right side. And there's just enough random hairs popping over that I occasionally look at myself in the mirror and I'm like, okay, I don't like how that looks, because it's uneven, it's unsymmetrical. I have to deal with that. And I've known people in my life who went bald at 25. And that affects how they are seen, how they see themselves. That affects their daily life, the jokes people play on them, and so on. Then a lot of folk I see tend to spend obviously quite a bit of effort on their hair, on their look, on their aesthetics. And I can barely begin to appreciate the messaging there and the work put into it. But again, it's not always clear to me why, because my reasons tend towards these more extreme hairstyles. If someone comes with a mohawk, I'm immediately going, okay, I sort of understand why they might choose that. If someone comes up with a trim, I'm going, I guess I'm not entirely clear on why you took 2 inches off the bottom or something, because that's not an activity I myself engage in. Which, I'm talking about haircuts here, but it could be used for all sorts of other instances too. The cars people drive, the way they dress, what they do for fun. I tend to see the world in a certain way, and I understand messagings and rituals and ideas and aesthetics, which mean something to me in my particular story that doesn't always result in an understanding of what other people's story or meaning is for them, why they are doing something. It's the issue of life, the problem of other minds. They don't always understand why someone does something of a different kind than us and why. But we can. It just requires some communication. It requires a bit of thinking. It requires trying different hairstyles or trying different ways of dressing ourselves and using those instances to reflect upon the experiences of others. How much can we understand? Conversely, how much can we understand about ourselves? Why did I have that haircut? Why do I have this braid? Why do I spend so much time with my hair? Is it for personal reasons? Is it because it's the culture I've been indoctrinated into? Is it because I want to stand out to somebody? Is it because I want to send a message? And who's this message for? Other people or me? Do I want to look like everybody else? Do I want to look like myself? And where is the balance between that I aim to find? For me, it's just a little on left field or right field, just standing out just a bit by having a hook or a trick, but not going as far as I might, because I just don't really care that much at night. And I think relatively soon I might trim this again, as it becomes longer and longer, a little more unwieldy to deal with. But that is for future me to determine in the next haircut.